I am a good student. I am a good son. I am a good brother. I am a good friend. I am a good human being. I am that person that, like all of us here, deserves to pursue his dreams. I define myself. My name is Hugo Dominguez. I am undocumented, unafraid, and unapologetic.
Today is a very, very important date in the history of Chicago and in the history of this country. March 10th of 2006, we saw the largest demonstration in the history of this city. 750,000 immigrants, undocumented and others, and their supporters marched through the streets of Chicago. Marched through the streets of Chicago, and then a few days later, 1 million marched in Los Angeles. And then we had millions across the country that were marching for the rights of undocumented workers and undocumented students and immigrants in this country that are trying to make a living and trying to become citizens. That was an important moment, not only because of the numbers, but it was an important moment because it proved that mass action and mass mobilization sometimes, most of the time, makes better policy than the legislators that are trying to make policy for us. We defeated that anti-immigrant Sensenbrenner bill because there were 750,000 people in the streets that day. We defeated that bill in Wisconsin because of mass mobilization and because of all of you supporting that incredible mass upsurge and movement from the immigrant rights community. And we're also here because the communities that have been victimized the longest in this country continue to be victimized. African Americans and Latinos who are criminalized every single day in this city and other cities around the country, who are swept up and criminalized, young people, young blacks, young Latinos, accused of gang membership, accused of being criminals because they're hanging out in the streets. And then in prison, we know what happens to them. We know that in Chicago, there have been commanders and other police officers who have been convicted of their torture of these young black men and these young Latinos in Chicago. And that torture is happening across the country. People who have been in jail for decades in this city, young black men and young Latino men, because they were tortured into false confessions. We're here to say no to the profiling of blacks and Latinos and other oppressed nationalities and communities of color in this city and this country. No to racial profiling and the criminalization of youth of color as well. And so it's a historic day in which we're talking about immigrant rights. We're talking about the rights of Arabs and Muslims. We're talking about the civil liberties for all. And we're talking about the criminalization of blacks and Latinos. It's an important day and it's an important moment for us because we need to be loud and clear about this indefinite detention provision in the NDAA. We need to be loud and clear to say stop the torture of young men and women of color in this city and in this country. We need to say undocumented immigrants have the right to an education. They have the right to move forward and get citizenship in this country. And we also say that we have the right to dissent against those policies of Obama, of Bush, of whoever it is in the White House. We have the right to that dissent, and we refuse to be criminalized for coming out and defending our rights. The last issue we want to address today is the FBI repression against 24 of us, 23 in the Midwest, and Carlos Montes in Los Angeles. My home, as some of you may know, was raided on September 24th of 2010. 23 of us were subpoenaed to a federal grand jury that year. And then Carlos Montes in Los Angeles was raided by the FBI as well and attacked for his anti-war activism. We are attacked for our anti-war activism. We are attacked for our support of the legitimate national liberation struggle of the Palestinian people. We are attacked because we say no more war on Iraq, no more war on Afghanistan, no war on Syria and on Iran and everywhere else that the U.S. tries to extend its empire. So those 5 issues are very, very connected. We appreciate you coming out today. And one of the main leaders in the Arab and Muslim community in Chicago, and one of the main organizations that is leading the work to defend the rights of Arabs and Muslims in this city and in this country, is CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations. Their executive director is here with us today. I want to introduce Ahmed Rihab.
If you believe in freedom, let me hear your voice. If you believe in freedom, let me hear your voice. My dear friends, you may look around you and think that we don't have large numbers. But let me assure you that the good news is that our target audience is here amongst us. The government is spying on us right now, and so they'll be here to listen to what we have to say. And we want to be able to draw the lines in a clear manner. We're not going to let them frame this the wrong way. We are not here because we're anti-American. We are here because we're pro-America, and we're against the un-American, anti-American policies that are taking place by some in government, some in the police, some in the CIA, and some in the FBI. We are here to say that America is the land and the home of the free and the brave, and not a place that is a police state, not a place in which spying is part of government policy. We are here to object and to protest against the criminalization of activism. We stand in solidarity with the Midwestern 24 anti-war activists who have done nothing wrong. All they have done is to use their voice and use their energy and activism to support social justice, to support the legitimate liberation movement in Palestine, to stand up and speak out against the wars that are taking place in the Middle East that are unjustified, in which trillions of dollars are being spent of our tax money, in which our brothers and sisters and sons or daughters are going to die for a cause that is unclear and based on a lie in the case of Iraq. We are here to say no to war. We're here to say no to war in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and potentially in Iran. As we stand here today, the war drums are beginning to be hit, not just by Israel, but by the eerie silence of the circles of power in this country, as if we have no power whatsoever to restrain a rogue regime gone wrong that wants to take the Middle East into a greater war that will have no end in sight. This is a great danger that does not just affect the progressives and the liberals or the Muslims and the Arabs. This is a great danger that affects the world, and it affects all Americans. We are the vanguard. We're the canary in the coal mine. We are speaking out, not for our own self-interest. We're speaking out for the interest of America, of the world. So be proud of who you are. Be proud of yourselves for being who you are, and continue in this path without fear, without being intimidated. Let me remind us all that this home of the brave and land of the free is not a place, or should not be a place, in which this government opens up offshore prisons and torture chambers and concentration camps in order to circumvent the Constitution and the laws of this nation. And I'm talking about Guantanamo in Cuba. The home of the brave and the land of the free is not a place in which the FBI and the police in New York, and perhaps in other places, spies on and targets non-criminals. We're not against the FBI doing its job. We're not against the police doing its job. We're not against targeting and going after criminals. We're against the abuse of power. We're against the spying, the surveillance and the criminalization of good people who've done nothing wrong but to speak out in a way that the government considers unwanted, undesirable. My dear friends, as the executive director of the Council on American Islamic Relations, I can tell you that over the year 2012, anti-Muslim hate crimes have gone up 4 times over. Okay? Islamophobia is on the rise. And I see signs here, stop Islamophobia. And I thank you for coming out with this message. Again, it's a cause that does not just affect Muslims and Arabs. If we stand by silently as Muslims and Arabs are targeted by extra-constitutional measures, by illegal measures, if they're criminalized and if they're targeted by the government simply for having positions that are deemed politically incorrect, who's next? Who's next? We're here to support our fellow Muslims and Arabs in their fight, in their stance for civil rights and civil liberties. We're here to support our friends in the Latino community as they stand up for their rights and their humanity. It's civil rights and human rights. The great Malcolm X said civil rights is but a subset of human rights. We're all entitled to dignity and respect and freedom. And so we stand in solidarity with these communities. We also stand in solidarity with our fellow European Americans who stand with us, who are targeted just for standing with us, with our friends in the Jewish community who stand with us and are targeted simply because they stand with us. And our message is clear, it's straightforward, and it cannot be mistaken for anything else but a call for the respect of the law, for the respect of the Constitution. We are against the National Defense Authorization Act that makes it the law, contrary to the Constitution, to target, to detain, without due process, individuals around the world, including Americans, simply based on suspicion. That is un-American, that is anti-American. That is not the foundation of this nation. Every great civilization in the past was not taken out by outsiders. It was weakened from within when they lost their values, when they lost their basis. We don't want that to happen to the United States. And so we consider ourselves to be the patriots. We consider ourselves to be the ones who are standing up for a greater, stronger nation by standing and upholding the foundations and the values of this nation, and by standing with the Constitution and against any and all who try to weaken this nation by circumventing the law of the land. Thank you very much.
I'm going to bring up now somebody who's been a leader in the Committee Against Political Repression, supporting those of us who have been raided and subpoenaed, but also supporting us in general in our rights to speak out and our right to challenge the government and its foreign policy and its domestic policy. Maria Pizarro is a wonderful friend and a longtime activist who was exiled from Chile in 1973 when Allende was overthrown and killed. And she's been a great mentor to me. She's like a mother figure to me, and she's been at the forefront of the movement for immigrant rights and for protecting the rights of activists and organizers in this city. Maria Pizarro.
Good morning, brothers, sisters, compañeros, compañeras. We are here because we are under attack. We are under attack as Muslims. We are under attack as people of color. We are under attack as immigrants. We are under attack as students. We are under attack as elderly. Our rights are being trampled systematically by the 1% of the society and their political representative. Our education, our health, today they are not rights for the city of Chicago. Education and health are no longer right for us. They are commodity, they are merchandise. Housing, immigrants' rights, jobs, every single right in this moment they are taking away. We can no longer tolerate that. The systematic, in this moment, the systematic attack to our rights is something that we can no longer be tolerated. Why? Because a society that keeps silent to the abuse is a dead society. In this moment, more than ever, we need to keep ourselves together. We have the political fight together as a united front of every single group that is abused. We need to have a united front of workers, immigrants, community, women, elderly, in order to fight back. Government want to keep us silent, and we need to be very clear that we will not be silenced. We are standing up for our rights, and it's clear for the government that today we will not tolerate that the international solidarity will be penalized. We have a number of students, youth, our youth, the great proportion of them, they are in jail, and mainly they are black and Latinos. Therefore, I called you for the united front. More than ever, we need to fight together. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. FBI, you're out of line. The way this works is when I say something, you got to repeat after me. I'm sure none of you have been to rallies before. FBI, you're out of line. Organizing's not a crime. FBI, you're out of line. Organizing's not a crime. The G8 has decided that they're going to go to Camp David instead of Chicago. One down, one to go. It is because of the work of the incredible anti-war activists in this city and in this country that the administration made that decision. One down, one to go. But right now, NATO is still coming to Chicago. And we're still planning to demonstrate and rally and protest NATO when they come to Chicago. We have a great coalition that's been formed, CanGate, in Chicago to organize that anti-war protest of NATO and the G8, and to speak about that work and about our preparations for that mass rally in May is Joe Osbaker.
Thank you, Hattem. I think we also have to give credit where credit is due to the movement we all call Occupy for short. Occupy Wall Street and Occupy Chicago. And in that recognition, in that spirit, a new chant. Opposing war and greed is not a crime. Opposing war and greed is not a crime. Opposing war and greed is not a crime. I can't believe we have to say this. I can't believe that the city of Chicago has treated people who only want to stand up against the attacks on our standard of living, who want to oppose inequality, that they treat the Occupy movement like criminals, and they have treated the anti-NATO and anti-G8 protesters since July. The mayor and the superintendent of police have vilified us. They have threatened us with mass arrest. They have frustrated our attempts to get permits to march against NATO and the G8. And the media, of course, has taken up that same message and has shilled for them. And it is a remarkable thing that the media asks us every time we're in front of a camera or a recorder. The media asks us, you know, well, are you going to be violent when you march? Not once has any representative of any major news media asked, why are you marching? Not once have they asked us about the violence that NATO represents. Not once have they talked about 10 years of war in Afghanistan. Not once have they talked about the 50,000 dead Libyans that NATO calls a model for regime change in the Middle East. Not once have they talked about Syria and the threat of war there. Not once have they asked us about opposing war in Iran or opposing the occupation of Palestine. And therefore, it is up to us to bring that message out. We're going to march in May on the opening day of the NATO summit to the Secret Service. We have this message: keep your hands off our permits. We have just because you declare this a national security event does not give you the right to suspend the Constitution. And to the city of Chicago and to the Obama administration, we're coming to tell them opposing war and greed is not a crime. Opposing war and greed is not a crime. Opposing war and greed is not a crime. And finally, brothers and sisters, next Sunday, the 18th at 3 p.m. on Devon Street in the heart of the Indian and Pakistani community, we are going to march from Hoyne and Devon? Hoyne and Devon. We're going to march to mark another sad anniversary, the 9th anniversary of the war in Iraq. 1 million dead Iraqis. We have an obligation to march in their memory and to say no more wars. Stop the drone attacks on Pakistan. Get out of Afghanistan. And NATO, when you get here, we're going to be there with our thousands and tens of thousands of brothers and sisters to give you the kind of proper Chicago welcome that you deserve. No to NATO. No to NATO. No to NATO. No to war. No to war. No to war. Thank you, brothers and sisters.
Occupation is a crime. From Iraq to Palestine. I think it's important to just say one more thing before we march. We've gotten a little bit bigger, and this is great. We're going to march down to the Federal Plaza, and we have one more speaker who will be there too. We're going to come back here because today is a National Coming Out of the Shadows Day for undocumented workers and undocumented students, and we're going to join our partners with the Immigrant Youth Justice League back here when we come back from Federal Plaza for their speak out. But I just want to say, last night in Gaza, the criminals in Israel and their supporters in the White House began bombing Gaza again. 12 more Palestinians were killed last night. We have to monitor this situation very closely. Please pay attention in the next few days because we may need to mobilize again on the Israeli consulate in Chicago. Israel does not seem like it's going to stop its repression anytime soon. The U.S. continues to give it cover, and we need to be ready to respond. 12 more Palestinians, 1,400 killed in the Gaza war 2 years ago. Gaza is still the biggest open-air prison in the world. It is still under occupation. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. And the Palestinians continue to need our support. So, we're going to start heading and chanting to the Federal Plaza. Follow Jay Berger over there. He's got his sign he's holding up. And then we'll be back here to join Ijil. Thank you very much.
Activists under attack, so what do? Stand up, fight back. Activists under attack, what do? Stand up, fight back. Activists under attack, what do? Stand up, fight back. FBI, you're out of line. Organizing's not a crime. FBI, you're out of line. Organizing's not a crime. Every Muslim, they're under attack. What do? Free Palestine! Solidarity's not a crime! Free Palestine!
Organizing's not a crime. Thank you very much, everybody. We've got a speaker who is going to explain why we're going to the Daily Plaza for the Immigrant Youth Justice League Speak Out. She is an activist with the Immigrant Youth Justice League. She's an Arab and a Muslim, and her name is Alat Mukahil.
My name is Alat, and I'm undocumented. I'm Palestinian, born in Kuwait, a citizen of Jordan, raised in Chicago. We came on a visa that expired when I was 7 years old. 18 years we've lived in fear and shame. 18 years beating down on me with a list of can'ts. Can't work, can't travel, can't drive, can't get financial aid. The threat of deportation has always been more real to me than the concrete I walk on. 18 years later, I'm still here. I searched for a line to stand in. When I applied for asylum, I was placed in deportation proceedings. When I reached out to my community for help, people didn't know what to do. But of course, people didn't know what to do. We're too focused on being assimilated to be considered American. Some of us forget we're immigrants too. But why? What are we trying to prove, and to who? To be unapologetic is to never apologize for the racism, bigotry, and oppression of minds, laws, and policies. To declare that we define ourselves, that we will not allow anyone to determine who we can and can't be. Yes, I'm proud to be Muslim, proud to be Palestinian, proud to be a Chicagoan. I'm unapologetic in who I consider myself to be. And no, I'm not waiting for anyone's approval. And I can't cut myself into different pieces and issues. My struggle as an undocumented person is intertwined with who I am as a Palestinian, which is intertwined with who I am as a Muslim. The reason I'm undocumented today is directly connected with what happened in 1948. The struggles, though not the same, intersect and intertwine. I'm here today because I'm a human being with a dignity that demands justice. The same dignity that 400,000 deportations a year, that even this administration knows is that the system is deeply flawed, knows that families are torn apart. And for those families, they're called collateral damage. I am not collateral damage. My family is not collateral damage. And I will not anyone, and my dignity will not allow anyone to dismiss it as such. Not here, not in Palestine, not anywhere. And so yes, we'll oppose any law, policy, or system that degrades any human, because the struggles intertwine. But it's not enough. Solidarity is not enough, and I'm tired of empty words. I'm tired of organizations that say they support undocumented youth, but can't or won't hire us because they can't risk it. That hurts more than any anti-immigrant policy. Preach on from your pulpits, but words mean nothing. Nothing to me without action, without risk. You say you feel bad, you want to do more, but really, how far will emotions take you if the only risk you're taking is the one in your head? Feelings of pity, remorse, and regret aren't really of much help. We need to step up. So I'm here to tell you, if your hope is in the law and the system, you're wrong. If your hope is in politicians and administrations, you're wrong. Let go of false hopes and promises. The only real hope is right here in us, in me, in you, and our ability to organize. The only hope lies in the risks we're willing to take and in the boundaries we're willing to push. So stand up straight without any fear or apologies. So tell me, what are you willing to risk? Every year since 2010, a group of undocumented people, despite the fear, take a risk and declare themselves undocumented, unafraid, and unapologetic right here in front of hundreds of people. Today at 1:30 here in Daily Plaza, a group of undocumented people will declare themselves undocumented, and we will witness it happen. A group of people will be putting their entire lives on display. They will share their stories, their struggles, their hopes, and their dreams. They will be risking their lives. And I'm asking you to join me in supporting this group, to join me to go over to Daily Plaza and witness this happen. My name's Anat. I'm undocumented, unafraid, and unapologetic. Thank you.
Stop attacks on immigrants now. Stop attacks on immigrants now. Stop attacks on the black community now. Stop attacks on the black community now. FBI, you're out of line. Organizing's not a crime. FBI, you're out of line. Organizing's not a crime. One more speaker we've got before we head back to the Daily Plaza, and it speaks to the issue of organizing not being a crime. 6,000 people have been arrested in the Occupy Wall Street movement across the country. We have somebody from Occupy Chicago here who's going to speak to you as well, Sarah Wild.
We are united here, though some of us with papers, some of us not. For we all know that division is an unjust, false division, a barbaric one. We must shine light on its dark underbelly, on the business of trading the undocumented, the racially profiled as commodities. We must illuminate those who require for their profit the criminalization of all those without papers. We must shine light on those that profit from attacking all immigrant communities. And who is it? What, can we name a company that does this? Yes. The Corrections Corporations of America is one of these companies, who in 2010 made $1.67 billion from private detention facilities. We shine light on Bank of America, who invested $450 million in this company. Since 2001, the private prison industry, including the Corrections Corporation of America, has given $7.3 million to candidates and political parties. Under Obama, 1 million people have been deported. Under his ramped-up policy of secure communities, Congress requires ICE to deport 400,000 people a year. This is their set target, and this is good for sordid profiteering. For over 30,000 people a day are held in private detention centers for profit. This is a barbaric intimacy of corporations, lawmakers, and law enforcement. We say no to this marriage of law and racist economic forces. We stand with our black brothers and sisters against all racial targeting and the systematic violation of rights to a dignified life. We say no to pulling families and communities apart, where individuals detained have no due process, no rights or legal protections, are subject to racial, sexual, physical, and mental abuse. We demand, number one, amnesty for all. No human is illegal. Lack of U.S. citizenship does not justify discrimination nor the negation of human rights, including the right to freedom of movement and to equal education. Number two, we call for a moratorium on all deportations and for public participation on immigration reform. Number three, we call for the abolition of racist and anti-immigration laws, economic systems where corporations profit off criminalization, and push our communities further into the shadows where profit is made from abuse and exploitation. We say enough of the criminalization of all people based on race, documentation, class, religion, gender, and sexuality. Enough to this barbaric system. We know how your dark shadows work, and we are emboldened and unstoppable. Thank you.
Activists are under attack, so what do we do? Stand up for right. Keep up the fight. Protest is a right. Keep up the fight. Protest is a right.
My name is Shanat, and I'm undocumented. I was born in Mexico City to a loving and caring family. When I was 9, my family made the difficult decision to come to the U.S. in search of jobs, opportunities, and a better life for me and my sister. I can't help but admire my parents. I thank them and feel proud to have them by my side. They are some of the most giving individuals I know. As a kid, after having volunteered at the zoo, for 1 year I was asked for my social security number. And I remember feeling broken, trying to comprehend my situation. However, my mother refused to have this affect me and immediately contacted organizations to advocate for me. It was then that I saw how committed my parents were to make my life as an undocumented kid as seamless as possible. However, through college, I was once again constantly reminded of what it meant to be undocumented. It was specifically difficult being away and not being able to speak to my father for weeks at a time, trying to call him to talk to him and tell him about what I had just learned in my genetics class, and being unable to reach him as he was working his third shift that night. This I came to accept as I was determined to reciprocate their dedication. How could I not? When I was in high school, my grandparents became ill, and I watched my parents struggle as they made the heart-wrenching decision to remain in the U.S., fearing that if they were to go back, they would jeopardize their children's opportunity for a better future. Back then, my father had applied to change his status, and one of the conditions was that he could not leave the country. We felt helpless. We tried to remain in contact through the phone as much as we could, and despite my grandparents' reassurances, I could not help but miss them. The last few times we were able to speak to my grandparents, our conversations had become limited. My grandmother had become unable to have full conversations, and my grandfather had been progressively losing his hearing. I craved seeing their smiles. I was angry that I couldn't be in the same room with them. All I can remember about the night my grandmother passed away is standing in the hallway outside my parents' bedroom as my mother spoke to my grandmother on the phone, telling her how much she loved her. That night, I was shaken by our reality. For the first time, I understood what it meant to be powerless, what it meant to love your children and be willing to sacrifice for them, and what it meant to be undocumented. It was also the first time I became acquainted with feelings of helplessness and frustration. I've often wondered if our sacrifices have been worth it. Regardless of my parents' sacrifices, regardless of my trying to prove myself worthy of a chance, I find myself in the same situation. Unemployed, unable to help my parents financially, unable to apply to med school, unable to travel without worrying if I will be having to make a call or receive a call from a loved one from a detention center. At the moment, I can only dream of the day I will be able to graduate from med school, the day I will be able to travel without fear of being separated from my family for 10 years, the day I will be able to boat, the day I will be able to visit my grandparents' resting place and thank them for their understanding. It has been 2 years, 10 months since I have graduated from college, and my dream was put on hold due to my status. Unlike my peers, graduating did not mean the beginning of a career. It did not mean I was free to travel or explore what the world had to offer. To me, graduation only served as a reminder of my limitations. Never before had I been so confronted by the limitations in the days following graduation. I no longer had anything to look forward to. My biggest fear was having to accept my circumstances and having to give up my aspirations. During this time, I have gone through many emotional roller coasters. It wasn't until the rejection of the DREAM Act 15 months ago that I finally came to realize that I could no longer sit and wait for politicians to do the right thing. I could no longer be a spectator. I refused to be marginalized or have my parents plead guilty. To me, the only criminal is the system, and those that support it are guilty. Today, I joined thousands of immigrants around the country, claiming the right for a fair and just opportunity to integrate and be recognized as part of this society. I define myself. My name is Shanette. I'm undocumented, unafraid, and unapologetic. name is Yaksad. When I was 4, I immigrated to the U.S. along with my sister and my mom, not really knowing why we were leaving our home in Mexico. I just knew that I was finally going to be reunited with my dad. At that moment, all I wanted to do was remember the way he looked. I wanted him to carry me in his arms. And most importantly, I desperately wanted my family to be together again. It did not take me long to consider Chicago as my new home. But as I got older, I began to realize that I was 9 digits away from even beginning to consider a piece of the American dream. The worst reminder came the night my dad called to tell me that my mom had been pulled over. Knowing that she did not have a driver's license, I tried to prepare myself mentally for how our lives would change. Would I stay or go back with her? I felt helpless while I waited at the footsteps of my school. I couldn't even reach out to my teacher, who was sitting a few feet from me, because he had no idea I was undocumented. Every minute that went by, I felt myself becoming paralyzed with hopelessness. With a matter of seconds, I had gone from being a 14-year-old waiting to be picked up from school to a 14-year-old having to make a painstaking decision. In those long hours, as I waited to hear back about my mom, I made up my mind. I would leave the home I had grown to love if my mom was forced to leave it. I should not have had to decide between my mom and my home. In fact, no child should have to decide between their parent and their home. Yet thousands of kids have to feel the pain every single day because of racist, abusive, and dehumanizing laws. So I stand here today because I don't want anybody to feel like they don't have a voice. I know what that feels like. I will not let my struggles, my dreams, and my existence be pushed aside or used in the name of politics. My life is not a political token. As a human being, I have a right to be happy. We all do. I invite you to stand up and fight with me for the justice we deserve. The government can attempt to take away our rights, but it cannot take away our will to fight. I am not backing down. I define myself. My name is Yaksad. I'm undocumented, unafraid, and unapologetic. Thank you.
My name is Manuel Cordova. I am undocumented. Growing up in Mexico, all I remembered were my parents arguing. One day, my mother took me upstairs hoping to shield me from the violence, but I heard everything. She could not hide the bruises all over her face that I saw the day after. She could not take it anymore. She told me that we were going on a trip. Without me knowing, she took me to the United States hoping to provide us with a better life. In the United States, the challenges never ended. My mom had to work 12-hour shifts and I barely got to see her. Despite this harsh reality, we were all thankful we had each other. One summer before my first semester at UIC, I was driving to my girlfriend's house. Suddenly, I heard the dreaded sound of the police pulling me over. For the first time in my life, I felt helpless. As my heart raced, thoughts began to bombard my mind. What would happen to me? Would I be deported? Who would honor all the sacrifices of my mother? Thankfully, the only cost that came was out of my mother's pocket, but the fear still lingered. During my first semester at UIC, I witnessed my first protest. All my life, I had been told to hide my status and to be ashamed of myself. Instead, these students were willing to sacrifice everything so that students like me could have a future, so that we could have a chance at life. I knew I had to take part in the movement. I would no longer live in the shadows. Instead, I was ready to fight. I look forward to the day where I can finally be able to apply to medical school, where I can finally drive my girlfriend to school rather than always having to rely on her, where I can freely travel the world and for the first time visit my family in Mexico, so that in the future I can serve as a doctor saving lives. I know that the struggles ahead are only going to continue to get worse, but I will not give up. I will continue to fight for my education, my family, my community, and for my rights as a human being. I define myself. My name is Manuel Cordova. I am undocumented, unafraid, and unapologetic.
My name is David. About 5 years ago, I was in my wife Fanny's apartment hallway, and she shared with me that she's undocumented. I shrugged my shoulders and started asking about the actual journey, just like I did with my parents. It didn't seem to be a big deal at the time. I don't remember ever fearing my parents' deportation, the police, or ICE. I guess you could say I was sheltered from this reality. I'm an Army soldier, and I'm proud of the work that I've done. I remember calling Fanny while I was gone. I called anxious to find out about her day, really just to hear her voice. One particular day, she had just found out that she got a scholarship for graduate school. I congratulated her, let her know how happy I was. I didn't say what we already knew, that I would once again find her asleep at her desk at 3 a.m. studying for midterms or finals. And for what? What was the point? She can't work anyways. It meant she would have been deported while driving to school and I wouldn't be able to help. This last September, I came home from Afghanistan. And just like the first time, I served my country to the best of my ability, setting my family and my friends aside. During the 10 months I was gone, my country deported over 300,000 human beings. My wife could have been one of them. To think that the country that I fought overseas for could also take my wife away while I was gone is ridiculous. The same country that could have deported my family while I was gone. My wife shouldn't have to worry about being deported before I get home, if I get home. I shouldn't have to worry about my own government taking her away from me. So many people believe that this is no longer an issue since we're married. I guess it's easy to believe that, especially since I'm a veteran. But every day I get home from work and face the fact that she may not make it home. I picture her being stopped on the way home from school, put on a bus, and being sent back to Mexico. It isn't until she comes through that door that I feel some relief, at least until the next day. I can't plan a vacation for us. She's not allowed to fly overseas. My wife wants to work. She wants to help us with money, but she isn't allowed to. We're scared to start a family. She could be taken away from us at any moment for anything. What else do we have to go through to prove that we're worthy of a normal life? The fact is, this immigration system is broken. So broken that our love is at no less risk than any other undocumented love. We need to improve ourselves now more than ever, as well as the world around us. That's why I want as many people to find out what's going on, to be aware of this travesty, and to realize that we're not alone. We're not the only couple that's going through this. My name is David, and I'm an ally.
My name is Fanny. I'm undocumented. I'm a graduate student and I'm an Army wife. Every time I talk to people who don't understand how the immigration system works, I get the same response. You are married to a U.S. citizen who is an Army reservist. You have nothing to worry about. You should be able to fix your papers in no time. Unfortunately, that's not my reality. David and I have been married for 4 years, and every time that I try to adjust my status, we are told that I should wait until the agreement gets passed because we cannot prove enough hardship to stay in the U.S. I cannot understand why a military family has to go through this struggle. No one talks about what it means to be an undocumented military spouse. Before my husband's deployment, I went to a family event. They prepared us for the hard transition, but nobody in the Army addressed how my undocumented status would lead me to feel disconnected, different, and isolated. Did any of the Army officers know that every time I heard the word deployment, fear and frustration were killing me inside? Maybe. But they didn't understand my fear of being deported because that meant that I might not be here when David got home. As an Army wife, I gave a service to this country. Through each phone call, text message, Skype session, and letter, I made sure to provide my soldier with the love and support that he needed. Now that he's home, I feel like the last thing I deserve is to live with him without fear. I think that going through a deployment is more than enough hardship. If this government really values military families, they must do something to ensure the well-being of my family. My husband needs me now just as much as he needed me while he was deployed. I'm a college graduate and I will get my master's degree soon, but I can't get a job. I can't even help my husband pay for groceries. for rent, for gas, for other expenses. I feel helpless. I don't want to be a burden. I want to feel independent and capable of providing for my family. But I'm strong, and I will keep fighting until politicians are playing games with my life. If they keep saying that I'm a criminal in this society, I will continue to prove them wrong. I'm a viable human being, Army wife, and graduate student. I define myself. My name is Fanny. I'm undocumented, unafraid, and unapologetic. We define ourselves. We are an undocumented family. We're unafraid and unapologetic.
My first and last name are somewhat common, and I think my story might be true, which is why I'm telling it today, to show how tough it can be. My name is Jose Alberto Martinez, and I am more than just a word, which is why I'm taking so long to say this one thing and tell you my story. I do not want to be purely written off into some stereotypical type and then be limited by it. I was born in Mexico City, or Distrito Federal de Mexico, and I am undocumented, but that's not all I am. I want to be a researcher, to one day get my PhD and get a science position somewhere. But despite my hard work, I find my efforts impeded by that single word, undocumented. I first had to encounter the difficulties of my status when I attended Whitney Young High School. Before graduation, I had hoped that things could change, and that for now, it was a distant problem. But when there was a week to go until we had to travel for academic decathlon, even though I was excited about the prospects of it, I was still secretly also filled with dread, not knowing what could happen at the airport. My coach was the only one who knew I was undocumented. I went with some nervousness that I was able to somehow hide from the rest of my teammates. Many of them still don't know. Going through this once did not make this easier. Senior year, when we went to nationals again, I was refilled with anxiousness, now 18, an adult. One of my teammates thought I was afraid of flying, not knowing that I wasn't afraid of flying, but of being deported, and of my dreams ending there. My aunt died nearly 2 weeks ago, and she was buried in Michoacan, Mexico. It reminded me of my great-grandmother's death, and how then, as now, I could not visit their burials. I feel disconnected from those realities, sad and frustrated by their unfairness. And it is experiences like this that reaffirm the injustice of our current immigration system. I speak to you today, despite my fears and doubts. We should not live in fear of the everyday. I know we're facing a tough time in our country, and that during these times, politicians find it enticing to use immigrants as scapegoats. Which is why I stand here today and tell you that we, the undocumented and our allies, do have a voice. Let us not forget the principles of freedom upon which this country was built, and let us not revert to old angers and fears. Let me tell you that whatever you call me, I'm not only Mexican or undocumented, but also an American, just like you. My name is Jose, and I define myself. I'm undocumented, unafraid, and unapologetic.
My name is Jocelyn. I graduated with honors from middle school. I was a cross-country and track runner in high school. I am now in college and getting a degree in psychology. But it wasn't like this about 9 years ago. I was in 5th grade. I had all my friends, my family, a puppy, and my life made in Mexico. I could not imagine leaving that behind. I came to this country when I was 11. I wasn't sure why. I remember having a mix of emotions while walking through the desert at night. When we ran out of food and water, I was worried about my little brother. He was only 3 years old, hungry, thirsty, tired from walking miles and miles on end in the blazing sun. I was scared. He was scared, but I didn't want to show it. I kept telling him that every time and everything would be okay. I remember me begging him to not cry and hold it in fear of getting caught. One night, as we came close, we heard people yelling. We saw bright lights and ran as fast as we could to hide. My heart was racing. I jumped over a bush. I scraped my hands and knees. They were bleeding, but I didn't care. I just wanted to be safe. As I hid, I saw a mother
been taken away from her little kid by an officer. I remember her screams, her crying out to her son, her holding on to that little boy's hand so tight, and her perseverance to stay with him, which only reminded me more of my brother and how I didn't want to lose him. As much as I wanted to help them, I felt helpless. I didn't want to be separated from my family, not then and not now. Coming to this country was a challenge, and I soon realized that living here would be one too. When I started middle school, I was scared of not fitting in, of being picked on for being the new kid and not knowing their language. I found myself confused every day by people that would talk or yell at me in a different language, as if their screams would make me understand what they were saying. Sometimes I thought I was in trouble. The only trouble was that I couldn't communicate with them and tell them I wasn't dumb. Tell them that I only needed time to learn and adapt. But it wasn't until high school when I realized what being undocumented implied. I was angry with my parents for bringing me here when I never asked them to. But now I don't blame them. They only wanted better and more opportunities for us. And even though there will be more challenges ahead, I know I'll get through them just as I have before. I define myself. My name is Jocelyn. I'm undocumented, unafraid, and apologetic.
I am that child who was sent to the corner in the classroom to read a random book in Spanish while the other students participated in class. I can't even remember the name of the book because all that was in my head was that I wanted to be part of that group. I am that kid who saw his dad feeling helpless when Grandpa died, and we couldn't go see him one last time because if we left the country, it would be almost impossible to come back. I remember seeing him trying to hide his sadness, working night shifts, and going to school during the day, pursuing that better life for his family. I am that high school student whose biggest obstacle when filling out a college application was that special 9-digit number, and who didn't understand why he couldn't get financial aid for college like the rest of his classmates. I am that young adult who, when he gets in his car to go to school, work, or simply to just go buy groceries, his hands begin to get sweaty, his legs start shaking. I remember when I got pulled over, I didn't have a license. The officer didn't believe it was me in my school ID. I was taken down for booking. As they took my picture and fingerprints, I thought to myself, I'm screwed, I'm getting deported, and couldn't believe it was only for a wrong left turn. Luckily, I didn't get deported, but I still remember this every time I'm behind the wheel. I'm that young adult who strives daily to continue his education, applying for as many scholarships as he can, hoping to get them, and working 2 jobs with the fear of losing them because of not having a social security number. I am a good student. I am a good son. I am a good brother. I am a good friend. I am a good human being. I am that person that, like all of us here, deserves to pursue his dreams. I define myself. My name is Hugo Dominguez. I am undocumented, unafraid, and unapologetic.